The fall into darkness had been endless. For Percy and Annabeth, the descent into Tartarus was not just through space but through the very fabric of hope itself. The air had been ripped from their lungs as the pit swallowed them whole, and when at last they landed, it was into a realm where no sunlight had ever shone, where every breath tasted of poison, and where the shadows themselves seemed alive with hunger. They clung to each other, hands clasped, the only anchor in a world where despair reigned supreme. Their friends were far above, carrying on the quest, but Percy and Annabeth knew that their own path would be one of suffering beyond imagination. To escape Tartarus, they had to survive not only endless monsters, but the very heart of chaos itself. The others aboard the Argo II were silent when the abyss swallowed Percy and Annabeth. The Athena Parthenos had been secured, the victory hollow in their hands, yet grief wrapped itself around them like a chain. Hazel's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Frank stood motionless, his broad frame trembling under the weight of loss. Leo turned away, guilt biting into him as though the fire in his chest had burned too hot and destroyed what he most valued. Piper clung to Jason, her voice unsteady when she tried to whisper comfort. Jason himself stared into the sky, jaw clenched, already thinking of how they could continue, for the world would not wait for grief. The prophecy remained, and their quest to close the doors of death demanded they press onward, though two of their strongest were gone. As the ship carried them onward, the burden on each demigod grew heavier. Hazel felt the pull of her strange gift stronger than ever. Her command of the mist, the magic that blurred truth and falsehood, began to reveal itself. It terrified her, for she knew it was a power that could save or destroy. Frank, meanwhile, began to embrace his destiny. His shape-shifting grew more powerful, and though the fear of his fragile life token haunted him, he found a strength he had not believed possible. Jason wrestled with his identity, Roman or Greek, leader or follower, and struggled to bridge the chasm that divided their worlds. Piper felt her charm speak tested to its limits, for keeping the group together was as difficult as fighting any monster. And Leo, always joking, always tinkering, began to realize that beneath the bronze and gears, he carried loneliness like a wound. Yet in that loneliness was a spark that would later change everything. Far below, Percy and Annabeth began their march through Tartarus. The landscape defied description, rivers of black fire, plains where shadows screamed, skies filled with writhing darkness. Every monster they had ever slain clawed its way back from death to stalk them again. The pit was a place of rebirth for monsters, and Percy and Annabeth were intruders in their kingdom. Each battle drained them, each step wore at their bodies, and yet they pressed forward. Percy wielded Riptide with desperation, his blade cutting down horrors that should not exist. Annabeth guided them with her wits, recalling legends of the Underworld, solving puzzles left behind by the ancient architects of despair. More than once, when Percy faltered, Annabeth's voice pulled him onward. When Annabeth despaired, Percy's hand reminded her she was not alone. They began to realize that Tartarus was not just a place. It was a living being, a mindless hatred that sought to swallow them whole. In the world above, the Argo II sailed across hostile lands. The crew encountered enemies that grew bolder as Gaia's awakening neared. Giants rose from the earth, more powerful than any foe they had yet faced, each designed to destroy a god. Without their divine parents beside them, the demigods barely survived each encounter. Yet with each battle, they grew into something more than children of gods. They became heroes in their own right, bound not only by prophecy but by choice. Trust was fragile, but it deepened with each trial. Hazel, in particular, began to unlock her potential. She learned to weave the mist itself, shaping reality, confusing enemies, even deceiving giants. Frank's courage became the steel of the group, his loyalty unshakable, his transformations into animals growing more fearsome. Jason and Piper learned to fight not as separate leaders but as partners, his lightning and her voice striking in unison. And Leo, though haunted by guilt, began to dream of something beyond survival, a way to end the war once and for all. In Tartarus, Percy and Annabeth encountered allies as unlikely as the enemies surrounding them. They met Bob, the reformed titan once known as Iapetus, who had been given a new beginning. Though his memory had been wiped, his heart had become pure, filled with kindness that seemed impossible in Tartarus. He guided them through places no mortal or god should tread, offering friendship when they had none. Alongside him came a creature named Small Bob, a skeletal kitten of shadows, whose tiny presence brought them fleeting moments of joy in the abyss. With their help, Percy and Annabeth navigated rivers of pain and pits of despair, facing foes like the Empusai, the Arai, and the embodiment of despair itself. Each fight stripped them raw, but their love became the armor that Tartarus could not tear away. The doors of death, they learned, could only be closed if attacked from both sides. Percy and Annabeth had to reach them from within Tartarus, while the others reached them from the mortal world. It was a race against time, for with each passing moment, Gaia's forces grew stronger. The Argo II pressed forward, pursued by enemies, battered by storms, yet never stopping. The 7 demigods knew that if the doors remained open, monsters would continue to pour into the mortal world unchecked, and no defense would stand against them. As the climax neared, the group above and the pair below found their paths converging. Percy and Annabeth, bloodied and exhausted, staggered through the horrors until they stood before the doors. They were guarded by some of the most terrifying beings in existence, including Tartarus's own consciousness. Even with Bob's help, the battle seemed impossible. Every step was a sacrifice, every swing of riptide a prayer. In the mortal world, the rest of the 7 faced giants intent on preventing them from reaching the doors. Jason, Piper, Leo, Hazel, and Frank fought with everything they had, their powers blazing in unity. Hazel bent the mist until reality itself wavered. Frank unleashed his shape-shifting with fury, becoming beasts of war. Jason called down storms, Piper shattered wills with her voice, and Leo hurled fire that seared the sky. At last, through sacrifice and unyielding determination, the 2 groups succeeded. Bob the Titan held back the darkness at the cost of his own life, his last words a promise to keep the path clear. Percy and Annabeth threw themselves through the doors even as Tartarus roared around them. Above, Leo and the others closed the doors from their side, sealing the passage and cutting off the endless flood of monsters. The earth shook, Gaia screamed in rage, and for a moment the world seemed to breathe again. But victory was not without scars. Percy and Annabeth stumbled back into the world of the living, their bodies broken, their souls haunted by what they had seen. They had looked into the heart of despair and survived, but the shadows of Tartarus clung to them. The rest of the 7 embraced them with tears and relief, yet all knew the war was far from over. Gaia still stirred, her awakening incomplete, and the final confrontation lay ahead. Yet something had changed. The 7 no longer doubted one another. They had been tested in every way imaginable, and their bond had been forged into steel. The Argo II sailed onward once more, battered but unbroken. The statue of Athena Parthenos loomed on its deck, a promise of peace between Greeks and Romans. The 7 demigods stood together at the prow, their eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind them lay Tartarus, betrayal, and despair. Ahead of them lay Athens, prophecy, and war. The path was uncertain, the cost already high, yet, for the first time, they knew they could face it as one. For in the depths of darkness they had found not only survival, but a truth greater than prophecy, that even when the gods falter, even when the world itself seems bent on destruction, the strength of friendship, loyalty, and love could hold back the abyss. And with that truth in their hearts, the heroes of Olympus pressed on toward the final battle.